Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Greg's Garage Pod with co-host Jason Pridmore. My name is Greg White, and Jason is on the other side of the country joining us. Hi, Jay.
What's up, G-Dub? How are we doing today?
Doing just fine. Back from
Great.
another weekend of archery. How you feeling? How you doing?
Great.
I saw you were at the motocross track.
I went to motocross track yesterday. A friend of mine rented LA County Raceway out here, and so they just had like a little private day. So there was about 4 or 5 that went out there. I just went out and watched, and I went to the AFM season opener. I was just there for the Friday practices. I wanted to go out there and just see what was going on. You know, I have some friends and things that are kids that are riding out there. So went out, watched a little bit Friday, and then that was enough to put me on the couch pretty much all day Saturday with my leg, but it's getting better. I'm going up to Dr. Ting's again tomorrow for 4 days. So that'll be good. But all in all, I'm feeling way better.
Well, that's good to hear, man. I'm glad to hear that. And I'm glad you're headed up north to Tings as well. It was a lot of racing this weekend. Did you get to see a lot of it?
I did. I watched every single bit of it. Like, I think that's the only good part about the injury that I had was that it's, there was some good stuff on TV that, for the last 3 weeks, I've been able to watch stuff and see where things have been. So it's been really fun and probably allows me to form more of an opinion because I got to watch all that stuff. And again, we had Supercross, World Superbike, we had TT at Daytona. I mean, just so much going on. And so it's made it, that part of it, the transition of getting better, a lot nicer. And I mean, before long, Greg, we're going to be, what are we, 3 weeks away? You and I head off to Atlanta for the first round of MotoAmerica. So everything's just coming up really quickly. And we got second round of MotoGP coming up in a couple of weeks. So it's amazing how fast time goes by once the racing season starts.
Well, let's get right into it, Jay, because round 2 of that Motul WorldSBK Championship happened over the weekend in Thailand. And yes, everyone, if you listened to the podcast last week, blah, 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 Jason was right. I was 100% wrong. Alvaro Bautista dominated the show with another three wins. Johnny Ray was second in all 3. Jay, were you impressed by Bautista, the races, anything?
The races were boring. Mm-hmm. Am I impressed by Bautista? 100%. I think he's a tremendous rider. And I think that we just need to go a different route with how we look at all this because, like I told you, I read stuff and I'm on Twitter and stuff, things like that. I just get blown away by some of the people that have never swung a leg over a motorcycle. They're just reporting and they're saying that MotoGP riders are step above and all this craziness. It's absolutely it's insane to me. Bautista with Ducati is right now, it's an unbeatable combination. He is riding amazing. Ducati has done a tremendous job at building a motorcycle per the rules, and people could say what they want, but Ducati's built an amazing motorcycle, and they really have. But when you watch that race and you see that he's 10K faster down the one straightaway they take the speeds from, and you go, well, there's literally 3 pretty big straightaways there. Anybody that saw the second race, he led off the start, and nobody could even get near him down the first straight. And please understand, I'm taking nothing away from the guy. Like I'm saying, Ducati has done a tremendous job building an amazing motorcycle. But you can't give somebody 10K difference down each straightaway and expect to be there. And, at Phillip Island, we heard all these guys rabbiting on about, oh, well, it's a Bautista type of racetrack and this kind of crap. So I guess Thailand's a Bautista type of track too, because he dominated there as well. So I think that people I've started to realize that people form their opinions more off of the fact of who they're really rooting for. And Johnny Ray's won for last 4 seasons, so people are sick and tired of hearing him win. So they're jumping on Bautista's thing, which is great. I mean, Alvaro Bautista is a tremendous rider. But yeah, will they do something? Maybe they will. Maybe they won't. I don't know. But Aragon,
they have to.
Well, the thing is you say that, but by the rules, they don't just base it off of one bike, Greg. And watching the weekend, Chaz definitely got closer this weekend. If you watched the Super Pole race, the first one on Sunday, he was running 8th and moving forward or running 9th. And there was a group of 4 guys right in front of him when it got red flagged. And so he got gridded up 9th for the final race of the weekend, but he was literally catching up to that group of 5. There was 3 Yamahas in there at the time. Haslam was in there. He was catching that group, and it got red flagged. In the second World Superbike race, he was running 8th, I believe it was, but he again was getting really close to that next group, and then his bike broke. So he has found something. He has gotten there. We knew it was going to take him a little time. Ruben Rinaldi's not anywhere even in the picture. Again, though, different motorcycle than what Batista's riding. Not the same. And then you got Eugene, and poor Eugene, he had no brakes, Greg, going into the last corner, and absolutely watching that video is horrendous. Thank goodness there's a ton of runoff there. And he basically was out for the weekend at that point. But he had actually showed a little promise on the bike as well. Watching a little bit of the race that I watched all, but if you watch Chaz, you can definitely tell he's a little later on the gas mid-corner in some spots, in my opinion, than what Batista is. So he's finding something. He's definitely finding. I think he was third in morning warm-up on Sunday with a very fast time. So he's getting there, is Chaz. But if they base it, they're not just going to base it just off Batista. They're going to base it off of more than just one rider. So will they change the rules after 3 rounds after Aragon? I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do. But now we're starting to see a lot more people talking about it, like a lot more within the inner circles of the industry, more expert type of guys talking about there needs to be something kind of done, So we'll see what happens.
Mm. What was interesting to me about the results is you had in race 1, Bautista, Ray, Lowe's, and we got to talk about Lowe's in a moment because that was a great effort from him.
Mm-hmm.
In 4th place, Vandermark, Haslam in 5th, Melandri in 6th, and Cortese in 7th. In race 2, or the Super Pole race, exactly the same. In race 3, or race number 2, the big, exactly the same. Bautista, Ray, Lowe's, Vandermark, Haslam, Melandri, Cortese. I don't ever recall, seeing anything of that nature before, and it just seemed very processional. I mean, I know that Haslam and Vandermark in race 2 had a real close one at the finish, and there were some other battles, Haslam, Melandri, Cortese in race number, or the Super Pole race. So it just seemed like, and if you can't just look at overall top speed, because if you look right, if you do look, all right, let's just take the Super Pole race, because that's a good example. Tires don't make a difference. You're just throwing it all. Bautista's fastest top speed, 309.5 kilometers per hour. Chaz, 309.5 kilometers per hour. The rest of them, Johnny Ray, 301.7, 299 for Lowe's, 301 for Vandermark, 303. So there is a significant difference in speed.
Yeah.
But we all know that speed isn't necessarily a lap time. And, you got to look at those lap times and say, okay, Bautista in race 1, 32.7, Ray 32.7, but they're doing them in a different way.
Totally different way, Greg. And you got to look at it too, that when Ray does it, to me, it's holding your breath going into every corner. It's literally the whole way around. He's riding as hard as he can, and that's what made Alex's effort so great this week. Is that he closed the gap down. He was third in each race, but it was a very, very. There was that from fourth back, nobody was even close to those top 3, all weekend long. So Alex and Vandermark both had really good races last year at Thailand. But, I think going back to what you're saying, when you look at overall top speeds, it could be a little deceiving, can't it? Because you just don't know who's drafting, who's not drafting.
Of course.
I mean, the BMWs need a step. That BMW is really good, and he's 20 kilometers down. I mean, Tom Sykes is 20 kilometers down. And when you see people make comments about, oh, now look at where Tom Sykes is, obviously Batista, it's like, God, you guys got to look at the big picture here. Like we really do want to see World Superbike get back to where it was. And I love the idea that we have a new winner. I love the idea that Batista came over and he's a part of the series and stuff. But it's almost like it's really strange. I know he hasn't won a long time, but it literally it can't be fun just winning races by 15 or 18 seconds when you know that you have as big of a technical advantage as he has. Like, you can look back, and I look back. There was never a time when in the last 4 years where Johnny had 10K on everybody down the straightaway. It just, wasn't the case. They built the bike, and 2 years ago, Dorna came in and started penalizing manufacturers with RPMs and that kind of thing. I think that's the slippery slope that we're walking now, because what Ducati's done is they've built a tremendous motorcycle, and in reality, it's probably going to drive up the cost of what we're seeing as consumers now, because the Ducati costs a little bit more, obviously, than the bikes that production-wise that we see out there, Greg. And now you might have to see some of these manufacturers making. They already do it anyways. I mean, like, you got the Kawasaki RR and the R1M. They already do it, but now there's going to have to be some significant development to try to homologate a bike that's going to be able to compete with the Ducati, and that's going to drive up costs.
Well, the rules makers in World Superbike have a task, because there's
Correct.
You could kind of split the difference, but there's really three ways to look at this. You can either choke off the Ducati if you need to make a rules change. You need to open up a little bit of RPM on the competition to get them closer, or you need to do both. Do a little bit of choking and a little bit of opening up. But again, the two racetracks we've been to so far, I don't think necessarily tell the story. But the tracks better than I do. Is April 5th and 7th, they're going to be at Aragon. Is Aragon a track where the top speed of the Ducati will shine, or is it going to lend itself to more of a rider's racetrack?
No, Aragon's going to be another walk away. No question, 100%. He'll win by 10 seconds if he wants.
Johnny Ray? You're talking about Johnny Ray?
No, I will. No, not Johnny Ray. No, I'm talking about Batista.
Oh, no? Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. No, it's look, again, it's when you have guys. Okay, let's put it this way. If Alvaro had come in on a Yamaha and was just mopping people up, I think, or even a Cowie, if he was teammates to Ray, you'd sit there and you'd look at it and go like, wow, like, but I promise you, like, we'll never get to see it, so it's not even really up for debate. He would not be doing the same thing on another brand bike. He would not be winning these races by 10 or 15 seconds, because when you put somebody on something, you put somebody as good as Alvaro Bautista is, and you give him a little bit of an advantage. And this bike is in its infancy as far as its development. It's going to get better. But, I read Chaz said something about he's putting it down to Bautista's size, and he's smaller than Chaz and this and that. It really doesn't matter what the thing is. You know what I never, ever heard? I'm going to ask you a question. We've never talked about this, but I'm going to ask you a question, because when Johnny Ray was winning as much as he was, right? When he was winning everything, how many times did you hear the argument, oh yeah, but where's Tom Sykes? You never heard it. You never, ever heard, well, where's Tom Sykes? Like, he's got the same bike and he's not doing the same thing. That's all I keep hearing. It's like, well, where are the other Ducatis? You're not seeing the full picture. You're just not getting it. Chaz will get it. He's going to start getting the thing better. And I saw him do that this week, and he's going to get it better. But it's such a moot argument, because people that are saying that don't really know the full story of what's happening with the other Ducatis. They just don't know. So it's not like they're all sitting on, there's not like there's 4 Ducatis to pick from at the beginning of the weekend, and Bautista goes in and picks one bike. They're all different. They're all different bikes. So, but I think Aragon's going to be extremely tough for the rest of the field again, because they've got a gigantic long straightaway down the back straight. I'd say it's longer than any of the ones that they've ridden so far at Australia or Thailand, the back straightaway Aragon. Front straight, and then it comes on big, long, fast one at the end of that onto another front straight, and then there's another straightaway over in the back. So it'll be very difficult for them to even get close to him at Aragon, I believe. And he's going to be motivated going there, being a Spanish rider and that kind of stuff.
Interesting side note as it relates to points. So if you look at the points, they've had 3 races each round, so 6 races, and Bautista's mopped them all up. Johnny Ray's finished second in all of them. And because you add that Super Pole race, instead of having a 20-point lead like we normally think would, because it's 5 points for each round, it's 26 points, because it's 12 points for a win in the Super Pole race and 9 points for second. So heading into Aragon, it's already 26 points. Lowe's is back there, 29 behind Ray, so 55 behind Bautista. It's a long season, still a lot of racing to go. But Jason, there was a note that came across my desk from World Superbike, a little press release. It wasn't until I think midweek last week, right around that time, where World Superbike made the decision that the Superpole race, the Tissot Superpole race, is actually an official race. It began the season as not an official race. And what that means is that it's now included in the rule book, or the record book, I should say, as a race start and a race win. Where before, up until last week, it was in question whether that was the case because of the length or something like that. So that's interesting because Bautista's all of a sudden, going to have a season and a half worth of starts that the other riders only had a season. So, the statistics on him could be skewed a little bit as we, head into the later part of the season in terms of, like, say, against a Ben Spies, Bautista become the winningest rookie of all time. Those records don't really mean anything in the long run other than, lining his pocket and stuff, but still a little bit of a side note on that one, on how that works.
Yeah, it's interesting because I always kind of wondered about that. Even when you looked at some of the guys from the past, like the Miguels and stuff, they only raced one weekend a year, or one race a weekend for a long time before the really double weekends started. But it's. I feel like doing these podcasts, we try to be as I really honestly try to be as diplomatic as I can about it, and I think that I just want to see good racing. You look at the MotoAmerica Championship. Man, you had the stat. Yeah, I know you're good with that stuff, but you had a stat like, was it last year or 2 years ago, that every race was won by less than a second? Not in 18, but in
2 years ago,
or 16 or something. And we're going to see that again this year. I just want to see good racing because I was bored when Johnny Ray was winning too. Like, it's no fun when you turn the TV on and like I would just fast forward through the middle part of the race just to see, I'd have it on my screen still, but I'd be, going 3 times faster than it needed to go to see if anything, crazy happened. And then you just kind of get there to the end and see who finished second and third. That was no fun for me either. There's got to be a balance. And I know Dorn is trying hard to try to find that balance, but it becomes a lot harder when you start restricting, or you start putting, restraints on manufacturers, because now you got a company that kind of, I want to say, they almost outsmarted the rules. They saw what the rules are. They did it to their absolute best. If you'd have told me 5 years ago that we'd see a bike revving to 16,000 RPM, I would have never believed you, really. Like, other than if it was something smaller displacement motorbike. But now we got this bike and it's amazing. Looking forward to seeing it at Laguna. Honestly, I think it'll be really fun to see Bautista at Laguna on a Ducati. But hopefully we can make it to where the racing can get a little closer. So we shall see, Greg. Also during the week, after we did our show last week, I was really excited about the Daytona TT because there'd been a lot of hype about it. And I watched the whole show on Fans Choice. Got to put a shout out to those guys for not only doing the Daytona TT, but we'll talk about the 200 here in a minute, but we could watch all the action on Fans Choice. But it's the third year running on the infield, Greg, where they actually run the Supercross. This year they had a little pavement added. Did you get a chance to catch any of it?
Yeah, I sure did.
And what'd you think?
Well, I like the course layout, like the idea of adding the pavement, all that kind of stuff. But when they lap all the way up to 5th spot. It was kind of like, it's good. I like that Indian, Yamaha, and Harley Davidson were in the top 5, but yeah, I wasn't all impressed with the racing itself.
I wasn't either. No, I wasn't either, because I think when I think dirt track, I always think of, the miles and the half miles and things where the racing's really, really close. And I caught a bunch of them last year, and it's really neat when you see 6, 7 guys. But the track, there's something missing there with the track that I was stoked that they tried to add something to it. It looks like every year, the one thing is they've not rested on their laurels, but the track just didn't lend itself to good racing. It's almost like it was too fast. You had 2 corners on the end that were real slow, and then it was just a bunch of kind of little nothings in between, and it just didn't lend itself to great racing. I was really going into it hoping I was going to watch some really tight, close racing, but if you got the start, that was pretty much it. I was really bummed to see JD do what he did. Wins his heat race, goes out in the semi, tips over in the first turn, and that was his night pretty much over, obviously. So we didn't get to see him. I know Jared Meese had some troubles too. He actually got some really lucky breaks watching that stuff with him. But other than that, I thought the racing was just boring. I was hoping it was going to be better, and it will get better. We know it. We know how close that stuff is.
But I mean, we got to send a shout out to Briar Bauman. Obviously, he 100%, won the race.
Absolutely.
Henry Wiles in second, Jake Johnson. I mean, some big names. Jared Vanderkoy in the mix as well. Bronson Bauman in fifth spot. I think, having Brian Smith in 15th and having Mees back in 17th place is going to be very interesting for the championship because they have been stalwarts the last couple seasons. I have to also send a shout out to 11th place finisher Larry Pegram.
Larry, it was so cool. Cool seeing Larry out there. I mean, it was good. I mean, I just got to spend some time with him, and obviously at Phillip Island, and he just loves to ride. Larry just loves to race, loves to ride. So I think it was cool to see him out there. I was surprised because I didn't know he was actually going to be doing it. So it was surprising. And then we had a bunch of our guys in the 450 class that we know. I mean, from our side of the road racing world, Jake Lewis. Poor Jake took a stock arm Z450 down there. I saw one of his tweets that he's never doing that again, especially with that big straightaway. That's probably the slowest that Jake's ever come through the tri-oval. I would assume
probably
on a stock 450 dirt tracker. Nick McFadden was fast. Corey Alexander was really fast. Him and Nick both took. I don't think they took each other out, but they kind of hit in their heat race. So they had to come from the last road just to get into their semis. Rispoli made it into the main event and then crashed before they went up over the jump there. So, but the 450 race again was okay, but it kind of was processional. There wasn't like a lot of passing and a lot of really good action that was there. So, Janish won it, which he looked fast all night, and didn't he used to do some road racing too, Greg, if I'm not mistaken?
I don't remember. I
think he did.
I think he did because I remember his name, and I'm looking at that going, oh, wait a second. I know that dude from road racing somewhere.
I think he used to road race.
So,
but he actually was great because he made passes to get up to the front and won the race. But he looked fast all night long.
And Jay, tip of the cap to American Flat Track because they're packing the fans in. They are
For
packing
real.
them in, and it looked like that crowd. Yeah, and they have hit on a really positive note on how they're promoting their series, and it's a lesson for us all. I mean, Supercross looks like it's had more fans, and Flat Track has more fans, so hopefully that spills over into road racing as well. It looks like people are starting to get out of the house and get hungry to watch good motorcycle racing, so that's all good signs, I think.
I agree with you, and I think that they'll continue to keep tweaking that down there. I mean, forever they were at Volusia Speedway, weren't they? I mean, forever they were at Volusia, and then they moved over to Daytona. They had the Flat Track just outside the main outside of Daytona there, but now they've brought it inside, and I think the idea behind it's amazing. It would just be cool if there was a way that we could make the track just a little bit better. Because I've seen some of the other TTs that they run, and they're actually really fun to watch. They really are fun to watch. So they'll get it better, Greg, I'm sure. And but yeah, and then we moved on to Daytona 200.
Yeah. So for Flat Track though, Yamaha Atlanta short track, presented by Cycle Gear, coming up at Dixie Speedway in Woodstock, Georgia. That's this weekend. But talking about the 78th running of the Daytona 200 that happened on Saturday, the win goes to Kyle Wyman on a Pirelli shod N2 Track Days Yamaha R6. And we had a chance to talk to Kyle. And I asked Kyle, like, hey, man, tell me about the actual race itself and how it went.
So started the race fourth on the grid, and knowing it's just going to be a huge pack of guys. I mean, it was like really 10 guys who could go really quick in that whole group. First stint, normal first stint for the 200. Everybody's kind of just slicing, and everybody kind of wants to lead a lap, but I was just kind of chilling, waiting for the first pit stop. First pit stop was super fast. We got in there and out of there pretty quick. I think it was like 20 seconds, fuel and tires, and you can't do both at the same time, so that's pretty quick. We got out of there, and I think I had to catch Posh and Kelly both. I think I was maybe a second behind Posh, and Kelly was a couple seconds in front of him. I caught Brandon, kind of was able to tow him up to Sean. And then it was the pack of 3 of us in the second stint. And I saw that Fong was in 4th, and I didn't know what kind of pace he had. So I decided to put my head down on the 2 kids and was able to build up a 5-second gap and break the draft. And that was huge. Gave me a lot of confidence for later in the race. But, you know, I was thinking at the time, man, I just broke the field. You know, nobody was able to come with me. Let's just get a clean pit stop, hold this gap, and that'll be it. But there was a lot more drama to come. Last lap of that second stint, I ran out of fuel right, and coming out of the International Horseshoe, it started sputtering, and I was nursing it. I was like, man, this 5-second gap, I need to get this thing in somehow. Short shift in. Came around NASCAR 4, and I was pretty much out of fuel, and Posh and Kelly flew by me. Fong flew by, and I was just, I was gutted at the time because I worked so hard to get that lead, and you know, breaking the draft at Daytona is not easy. So I pretty much coasted in the pits all the way down pit lane because we were the very first pit stall. Got in there a little bit flustered, got a quick stop, but the amount of time I lost by having no fuel, I think in the first pit stop, maybe part of the reason it was so quick is because they didn't get the fuel all the way full. When I went back out, it was like 10 seconds ahead of me and 22 seconds behind. So I had minus on and plus on my pit board, so I could tell, you know, how much time I'd have to make up ahead of me. It was, let me think, it was Fong and Posh who were 1-2. I was 3rd. And I started to put my head down those first few laps, and I got it down to, you know, -9, -8 over the course of, you know, 2 or 3 laps, and the math made sense where I could catch them. But then I started thinking to myself, my gosh, I'm pushing so hard. I didn't know at the time, you know, I thought we had fuel capacity issues. I'm like, what if I push so hard and then I can only get within, you know, 3 seconds of them, and then I run out of fuel in the last lap and I miss the podium? You know, I was thinking, man, okay, let me think here, you know, I'm doing a lot of like, you know, evaluation in my head during that 3rd stint, you know, trying to think of what's really the best decision, you know, and I decided at some point, I'm like, you know what, I'm going to short shift this thing. You know, I went from doing 49s to doing 52s, and my gap stayed, you know, +20 to, I think Hayes was 4th at the time. I was like, all right, that's it, you know, and accepted it fully. You know, I was like, we ran out of fuel and still finished on the podium. I'll take it. And then all of a sudden the red flag came out, 4 or 5 to go. And I was like, holy crap. I don't even know if, you know, what's going to happen. They're going to call the race. You know, is it going to be a restart? I was a little torn because I was pretty happy with the podium because I feel like I didn't have that good a pace on the banking. I never, the entire first and second stint, I could never draft anybody to the line. So I was like, you know, if you can't do that, you know, typically you're kind of screwed at Daytona because it's really hard to lead. So I was kind of bummed at first because I was like, oh, we're going to restart this. I'm going to get freight trained. You know, I just had that doubt that it wasn't going to work out. So, you know, after a couple minutes of kind of sitting there during the red flag, contemplating it, I figured, you know, I broke these guys earlier. Let's throw a set of new Pirelli rubber on there. Everybody's going to have fresh tires. You know, let's just see what we can do. Let's just kind of try to break it. It was 4-lap sprint. I kept myself in the top 4 just to make sure I didn't end up too deep and come to a white flag. I passed Sean Kelly into turn 1 and put my head down and broke the draft real quick. 49.3 on the last lap, and I didn't look back. That was it.
Going into the chicane, this is going to be a monumental battle from the chicane to the checkered flag. Wyman with the lead. He's got his head down. He's going to try to just open up enough of a gap, and Wyman, that Yamaha, showing the horsepower. Here comes second and third, trying to work together. Kyle Wyman, who was 4th here in the Daytona 200 just a couple of years ago, trying to hang on. Checkered flag out at the line. Wyman is going to do it. the number 33 machine up across the line. Kyle Wyman will win it. It'll be Sean Kelly in second. Bobby Fong gets up for third.
I definitely cried. I mean, it was pretty surreal. It's been an insane, couple months really, leading into this deal. And this was like this little like thing on the schedule that at times was like, really stress inducing, because it's like, I got all these Ducatis coming in, and, I'm going to pull Gary away from the shop, the crew chief for the 200. Yeah, a lot of emotion at that time, and figuring that we just did it. I got a nice little help in the budget by winning it. And my dad met me on the cool down lap, and he was crying, and, he's like, I can't believe, we've been doing this for so long, and you're freaking Daytona 200 champion.
So, I mean, that was a long one, Jay, but Kyle was willing to do it and tell us his story, and I thought it was great.
I love it. I've gotten to know Kyle really well. I'd like to think that like we're more than just some commentator racer relationship. This kid works so hard, and I had texted him, how are you doing this? Like, he's flying all over the place, taking care of these Ducatis. And a lot of people sit on their hands and cry about not getting this and getting that. And this guy just does it. He just puts himself out there and works really, really hard. And where does he get time to train? Where does he get time to do all this stuff? And then, oh, by the way, we got to go do the Daytona 200. Big shout out to N2 Track Days for supporting him and helping him with this project. Obviously, Gary Dean and all of them. If there's a guy in our paddock that probably needed a little bit of a boost and something that's really going to kickstart his season, you got to think it's that way for Kyle.
I want to send out a huge thank you to Daytona International Speedway and fanschoice.tv, where you can watch this race anytime. Just sign up at fanschoice.tv. They were the ones who allowed us to use that little clip from the finish at Daytona. So thanks a lot, DIS and fanschoice.tv. It was pretty impressive.
Yeah, go ahead, Greg. I made some notes just off of his comments, because I like the fact that when you and I do these, I don't listen to this stuff prior, because I like to listen to it so I can come out with, some of the things that I really noted in the race. Number one, Daytona, the funnest part about the race for me is the first 20 laps, because you have, 10 guys battling for the lead. And, you read a lot of stuff about people talking about the 200 and how it's not what it used to be and all this stuff. The fact is, we're getting some real name guys that are going down there. We're getting some great teams going down there supporting it. If it wasn't for Daytona, the 200 would have died by now. And even though I do believe that we shouldn't be down there on thousands, it's been a really good show, watching the 600s over the years, and they put up a big purse. So I think people need to pay attention to it a little bit more. And not only that, you got to see we're seeing some young American talent that we'll get to here in a minute. But watching the race, the thing that Kyle did that was so impressive to me is what's impossible at Daytona. He broke that draft. When he talks about after he came in after his first pit stop, there's probably not a better feeling, Greg, at Daytona than coming out of the chicane knowing you got 2 or 3 guys behind you and you make it to turn 1 without them drafting you. And it just gives you such a sense of motivation. And I can only imagine what Kyle was going through when that didn't happen, when nobody drafted him, and he went into turn 1, and then he proceeded to just pull away, and he was doing it with like perfect precision. He wasn't doing anything crazy in traffic. He was taking his time, but he was aggressive, a lot of controlled aggression. He rode perfect. I mean, he really did. And to open up a 5-second lead before the first pit stop, I mean, you know how hard that is, right? I mean, we know how hard it is. And when I saw him coasting into pit lane, I felt so bad for him, and I'm just glad it was only fuel,
Yeah. But Jay, there is kind of an elephant in the room that we need to talk about. Because...
Well, we'll talk about that. I think we could talk about that in a second. I think, the fact that, I know what you're going to go with this, and it's kind of the finish and all that stuff. You can look at it a couple of different ways. Okay. What people do is they get their emotion behind them, I feel. And there's nobody happier for Kyle than I am. I mean, I am. I just really, truly think that what he did was great. You heard him in this interview say that, he was happy with third. He had to basically strategize his race in a way where he thought maybe he had a fuel conservation problem. He could catch those guys, but he was having to then start thinking about, am I going to make it to the finish line? And that's kind of what the 200 is. The 200 to me is a different type of race. It's much more of a team race. Yeah, we have teams when we do our sprint races too, but this is a race where you get credit if you have great pit stops. You get hurt if you have bad pit stops. I mean, Sean Dillon Kelly, to me, watching him ride this week, I was so impressed by this young man. And I wasn't just impressed with his riding. I never saw him put a wheel wrong, other than the last lap coming out of turn one. I did see him get bucked out of the seat, which is 100% normal. And over 200 miles, I never saw him put a wheel wrong. So again, Chris and John have found somebody who maybe we don't know as well over here in the States. I know some people in Florida will know who he is. I'm looking forward to meeting this young man because he rode tremendous, and his interview after the race was so well polished, and he sounds like a very, very intelligent young guy. And to see him finish second, it was deserved, because on the day they did restart the race. And I still feel like nowadays we have the ability to look at aggregate timing and things like that. For the fans, 100%, it was a great finish. Everybody that watched it, I get it. But the 200 is a different type of beast than any other race. And the best way I could put it is, if I was in a triathlon and some guy pulled 20 minutes on me through the running and the bicycling, and now we're in a 26-mile run, and all of a sudden that poor guy gets 5 miles from the finish line, and they say, hey, stop for a minute. We're going to let the whole field catch up, and it's going to be a sprint to the finish. It negates a lot of work that those teams and the riders have done. I'm taking nothing away from Kyle, because Kyle was the fastest guy, and his last lap during the restart was incredible, 49.3. But I think that when you look at it, you have to look at it from more than just the perspective of, yes, it was a great finish. Yes, the riders put on a great show, but it's a 200-mile race that got decided in 4 laps. And you know what? I've seen all the arguments. I've seen everybody talking about it. Nobody's right, because everybody's going to have a different opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, of course, everybody's going to have a different opinion. As I have a slightly different opinion from you. I had more of a different opinion until really you brought up those arguments, because there is that old fallback. Everybody's in the same situation and blah 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 blah.
It's the same for everybody, right? That's what everybody says.
Yeah.
It's the same for everybody, but it really isn't. It isn't.
Yeah, it isn't, and it is. I have never raced the Daytona 200, but I have commentated plenty and been in the pits with plenty and seen the heartbreak that a team can create. I've seen the joy a team can get by overcoming problems during that race. It's just an incredible race, unique race for a reason. And I think that part of it is you had to do the work to stay on the lead lap, right? There were only how many riders? Six riders or something, or that were on the lead lap.
Yeah, 6 riders on the lead lap. And this goes back again. Sean Dillon Kelly comes into the pits with the leaders. I mean, the kid was right up front the whole time. And I have seen people absolutely lose their mind when they're having a bad pit stop. I have seen people freaking out. I've seen people just gesturing, and just this young man sat on the bike, and they were having trouble with the front axle, it looked like to me. And which is normal in these races, because this isn't something that the crew and all that stuff do every week. I mean, the only time they have to learn how to change wheels that fast is during the Daytona 200 now, or unless they're doing some endurance racing somewhere that I don't know. But the thing is that this young man sat on top of that bike while they were trying to change the axle, and he just sat there, and there was no gesturing. There was no shaking of the head. There was no pounding on the tanks. There was none of that. And I can't say at 16 years old I would have been that poised. I can tell you that for a fact. And none of it fazed him. And you know what he did, Greg? He went back out, and he got hooked up with Bobby Fong and Brandon Posh, who were the leaders of the race. And I saw people, and I was getting text messages, he should let him go. He should do this. He wasn't doing anything. He was literally drafting and redrafting. He wasn't stuffing either one of them in the infields. He was 1,000% riding so intelligently. And at that pace, him just kind of being a professional and drawing along with those two guys, he was not interfering. He was not doing anything of the sort. And as it worked out in his favor, because he drafted those guys at the line on the lap that it got red flagged. And tremendous, because then it put him up with the leaders, on the lead lap. So for the way the race was run, I don't know what else he could have done better other than win. I mean, he was really, really something good to watch.
Mm-hmm. So, like I was saying, it's kind of the same
sorry.
That's fine. It's kind of the same for everyone. And Kyle, after hearing his explanation of it and saying, "Look, I didn't know if I was going to make it to the end, and better third place than not." Sometimes we do hit the reset button, and Daytona has their own reasons for wanting to restart that race. My guess is it's probably based off of the mileage situation. You don't want to have an odd race. And so, look, they made the decision. It's odd, belly aching about the past isn't going to help. I would have been happy if anybody who was on that lead lap won that race. Honestly, I mean, it would have been an amazing story if SDK won it, if Fong won it. I mean, come on, if Hayes actually pulled it off, and Hayes' bike wasn't really up to snuff.
Nope.
I think Hayes was kind of, there.
But I think him and Kyle's bikes were the same. You heard Kyle. This is what makes Kyle's run even more impressive to me, was that I saw exactly what Kyle saw. I don't think Josh or Kyle really had the legs underneath them to really draft by those guys. Sure, when there was 3 or 4 guys wide, I think Kyle and Josh could kind of suck up to the back of them and maybe try to do a little something. But that's what makes Kyle's lap, even on the last lap, even more impressive. He ran from basically the middle of the International Horseshoe, where those guys were still on him, to the exit of 5. He nailed that infield so perfect that those guys weren't able to close up. And when you're in front like that and you head into the chicane, you got to make a decision when you're breaking into the chicane. And this is one thing I'd love to ask Kyle, is that when you're breaking into the chicane and nobody's gone by you from turn 5 to the chicane, your mindset has to be either, well, I'm going to get through the chicane as gnarly as I can and try to hold it, or, man, I'm a sitting duck. There's going to be 3 or 4 guys drafting past me. And those emotions are so weird that go through you when that happens. I'm very fortunate that I've actually been in that position at Daytona a couple times. And you can see the finish line in sight, and you're waiting for that feeling of somebody drafting you, Greg. Remember what that felt like when you're getting drafted on the bankings at Daytona? It's you almost feel like someone's got a rope on you and they're pulling you backwards.
Yeah.
I bet he was waiting for that the whole time, was Kyle coming out of the turn on the last lap. But the thing is that he ran that lap time on the last lap and led coming out of the chicane to win the 200. And yeah, great.
I mean, the lap before, he ripped the chicane, and by the time they got by him, I think he knew. I didn't ask him about this, but I got the feeling that he knew that if he really nailed that last lap. I mean, think about the move, Jason, and really not to call you out on something, but
yeah.
From your
call me out, G-Dub. I need you to come. We need some hatred in our thing between you and I, because we just get along too well. No, go ahead.
One of the things I loved the most was that Kyle just raced his bike to the end. He didn't
100%.
play games. And I remember a race, 750 Supersport, you and Ben Spies on the last lap had destroyed the field. And the two of you playing this little dodgy mouse thing, rolling off the throttle, rolling on to see who was going to run to the checkered flag. And I thought, man, how cheesy can these two idiots be? But you know what I mean? Like Kyle he went by in turn 1. I mean, Kyle led that entire last lap, except for, from the start finish line to the entrance of turn number 1. Beyond that, he led that entire lap. And I think it's normally we would say he's a sitting duck. So I love the fact that he didn't play games. He didn't say, oh, I'm going to just shuffle my way back to 3rd and try to catch a double draft because the bike's not good enough to draft 1. He just said, I got what I got.
Head down and go.
Got what I got, and I'm going. And whatever happens, happens. And I wonder, I mean, I know SDK did a great job, but I also thought that he may have given them, the rest of the field, and given Kyle an extra 1/10 of a second with a move he made early in the infield to pass for second early on in that lap. And it was a little bit of a gap. And if you look at the time of the results, I thought maybe that was a bit of
inexperience. He's 16.
Yeah, exactly. 16 years old,
And he's 16 and he sees the 200 right in front of him. Yeah, for sure, Greg. And he, if you watch,
Kyle thought to himself, Jason, he's like, okay, I know I have a 16 and a 17, right? Posh is 17, I believe.
Yep.
He might be 18. So I have a 16 and 17-year-old, and I have Bobby Fong around me. As long as he felt like Bobby Fong was with those guys, he had a chance. He thought he had the young guys covered because he knows the lines to take on the banking. He knows kind of what to do. And he knew that if Bobby gets close to him, that he was going to be in trouble. So it just, I guess in the end, 4 laps or 53 laps or whatever you want to say, in the end, it played out perfectly for Kyle. And I am really happy for him. And I have to say this, though, it was $25,000 for the purse, Jay. So for Kyle, you know, he mentioned earlier, he's like, that's a nice little budget hit or whatever. So I wanted to find out what he really planned on doing with that money.
Yeah, I mean, it's all, honestly, it helps fill the deficit that's still there, you know, for what I really need to do the year how I want to. You know, I have a goal of what I want to raise, and I never start the year with having all the money spoken for that I need to go racing. I gather it along the way. So this is a huge win in that department. I'm definitely gonna get my dad some money, because he just he works his ass off for nothing, and I don't even, you know, I don't have words to explain what that means to me, you know. But yeah, this is going to help huge. You know, we're getting the Morelli electronics from Ducati. I committed to that a few weeks ago, and now it certainly makes it easier to pay for that stuff. And you know, it's not like, oh, this chunk goes to this chunk goes to that. It's just a, you know, what am I going to end up with in surplus or famine, you know, at the end of the year. And this certainly helps.
You ever been in that situation after you won some big money, having to put it right back into the program?
Well, you know, Greg, I did a commercial for Gillette when I was younger, and I had no money to go racing. So that's where all that went. It all went to going racing, and I was lucky to get that. But I'm thinking about poor Hannah. You know, she's not going to get to see any of this, so we're going to have to hear about it. I love the fact that Kyle called those guys kids too. How old's Kyle?
I don't know, 27.
So he's pretty young. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about Bobby Fong and Brandon Posh, those two guys. First off, we talked about Sean Dillon Kelly and what a young, you know, 16 years old, great. Brandon Posh he reminds me a little bit of Kyle in the sense that he'll drop anything and everything to go race a motorcycle wherever it is. And he's got a really good opportunity this year in BSB. He's going to be racing over there again on a Moto3 bike. But if you follow him on Instagram at all, Brandon is just continuously working. And again, TSE gets close to winning the Daytona 200. They've done it in the past with Corey West. Their pit stops were absolutely perfect. And it was really looking like it was going to be between Bobby, who, let's be honest, this would have been a huge boost for him as well. I mean, we talk about what it is for Kyle. Bobby's had a little bit of a rough year last year. He gets signed for M4. It would have been a real amazing thing for him to go out and win the first race on the bike at a track and in a race that the Orches have been trying to win. It almost seems like they're a little snake bit. Last year with DeBees, they looked really good. The year before with DeBees, they looked really good. And for whatever reason, I was trying to figure out, I text Chris. I said, so happy or sad? And it was just a very funny answer, because he's happy and he's sad, both. Saying that you win the Daytona 200 is a huge thing, but they finished second and third, which is great for the team. Both their bikes made it around and never got crashed, which was great. Especially when you have
unlike Kyle's bike,
crazy restart like that. Yeah, we'll talk about that too. We're going to give Kyle a little bit of a hard time, but Bobby Fong, Brandon, both ran tremendous races. Where I'm hoping, that we're going to see Brandon back with TSC at some rounds in MotoAmerica this year. That's what we want. We want to see these young guys racing against our guys, and TSC's shown capable of being able to put a bike under people that can do that. And I think this was a great omen for Bobby as well, starting his season. He only tested the bike at Jennings that week, so he got a couple days under his belt at Jennings and then went straight to Daytona and raced it. And I think we got to talk. Obviously, you talked about him briefly, but Josh Hayes. The fact that Melissa put this bike together along with Chuck Chiquetto and some of them, they put this team together. They couldn't believe the amount of support and things that they got from people within the industry to get Josh down to Daytona. But that's because Josh is a good guy. But I think that he would self-admit that it was just one of those things where he just didn't quite have the pace on the banking, it seemed to me as well, to kind of do anything with those guys. But what a great effort for them to put something together. What was it, like 4 weeks out before the 200? And Josh was racing the Daytona. So I think that when you look forward and you move forward on this race, Greg, there's a couple things. I'm always hearing people bellyache about it being a club race, and it's not. There's not a club race in the country that puts together $175,000 purse. I think is what it was. Was it not? Was it 175?
Something like that is huge. I mean, 25,000 for the leader. I think 20,000 or the winner. 20,000 for second place, and 15,000 for third. That's a lot of money for second and third.
Yes,
and
no
on
question.
Back. So
I think
it's
that
a lot of big purse. Yeah,
it's great, and it's you look at it and you think we don't have a race in the country like a one-off race that has that kind of money behind it. Everybody talks about it being an international race and what it used to be. That things have changed a lot, and I'd love to see it get back to that. The one thing I find disturbing with this race that there's only one, believe it or not, for me. There's one thing that I don't understand. But in the race, we had 60 qualifiers. And I know that it's always been a thing to get as many people on the track as we can. But when you go down and you look at best lap to best lap, of the 60, the best lap of the race was 49. And the leaders basically lived in the 49s to 50 range, okay? Minute 49, minute 50. There was 16 guys whose best lap was 2 minutes or higher. All right. So there were some guys, if your best lap's at 2 minutes, probably means you're doing 201s, 202s, 203s. There were some people that were doing even more. The 15 to 16 to 17 second a lap slower lap times, I don't understand. I realize that it's a historical race and everybody wants to ride it, and I'll probably take a lot of heat for this, but I don't understand why you would want to be on a track getting lapped every 5 or 6 laps by a group of guys that are really chasing a lot of money. Yeah, you could be part of history and say you rode the Daytona 200, but it's so scary watching that race and seeing the speed discrepancies that you see between the fast guys and the guys that aren't quite up to speed. And the other thing about this race is there's a lot of guys that pretty much only do this race, or they'll do one race to qualify to do this race or whatever. And a lot of people aren't ready to go out and do 200 miles. So when you see guys doing 202s and 203s as their best, they're probably doing 206s, 207s in the race, right? I mean, Greg, I don't even think that you'd have got lapped every 5 or 6 laps.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. I'm going through a tunnel.
Well, maybe now you could, but I'm saying, like, isn't there a side of you that is just horrified or scared of getting in the way or being in knowing that there's going to be a big group behind you? I think I'd love to see, and people are going to go, why they qualified on time and they did. I get it, that the rules are the rules, and they've set a percentage of what you could qualify for, I'm sure, but I don't understand why if you're 10, 12, 15 seconds off the pace, that it's fun to go out and ride in a race like that. That's the one thing that I think I would like to change about the 200. But that's been a problem for many, many years. It's not just like the last 7 or 8, 10 years since they run 600s. There's a problem back when we were running the 200 as well. Yeah. Anyways, and the mileage record thing I think is what keeps a lot of people in. It keeps a lot of people. Oh, I gotta do more miles. It just doesn't. I don't know how many people really are looking up, hey, who's the mileage record holder at Daytona? To me, that kind of stuff is what makes, I'd like to see the race get a little bit better that way, because we had a lot of fast riders down there, a lot of club guys that I'd never heard of that were doing minute 51s, 52s, going fast. And I just don't know why we'd want to be doing 2 minute plus,
Yep, for sure. I mean, I think that people who fantasize about the glory days of the Daytona 200 coming back, especially with the 600 class, I mean, that's going to be a far cry. I'm not saying it's never going to happen, but to get the factory riders down there, I would love to see Suzuki go, okay, we're committed to doing the Daytona 200, and we're going to build 600s for one race, which would be an ungodly cost, and have Tony Elias show up at the Daytona 200. And I would love to see what Tony thought about it, if he liked it or whatever, because being up on those banks, it can be a little bit intimidating at first. I mean, it's unlike anything anyone's raced at in Europe or things that we have in road racing in general. Daytona is very unique. And I think if it wasn't for the history and the uniqueness of the pit stops, Daytona 200, would just kind of be like, oh, that's nice. But it's got a good purse. It's got a good history. It's been around a long time, and that's why they've kept it alive. And I do enjoy the race, but I also keep in mind that when Daytona used to open the AMA Superbike season, that a lot of people would roll their eyes about being down there and how that race would burn like 1/3 of your, or quarter or a third of your entire year's budget in one race. I remember, Jason, like you'd get done with that weekend and your body work would be destroyed. If you're a privateer like me, right? Like, I mean, because it would be pelted with sand on the banking, and, you'd go through windscreens and, have to repaint stuff. And that track would just beats everything up. So I love it.
I never would wear, I would never wear my new lids down there, Greg. Like the last 5 years, I would never wear my brand new painted lids that I would get from Airtrix or whoever was painting my helmets, because they would just get destroyed. And, the thing about Daytona is it's the kickoff. Like, that's what I remember as a kid. And now it's like, as soon as a Rolex 24-hour gets ready to roll at Daytona, that's like, racing season starts. So you get the Rolex 24-hour, and then it goes through the NASCAR a couple weeks that it's down there. Then you got your Supercross, you got all that stuff. And back in the day when it was all together, man, it was like Daytona is the kickoff. And I don't think that we could ever lose that fact that is actually Daytona has kept the race going even through its very most difficult times. And ASRA, CCS, they've done a great job in kind of keeping the 200 alive. And I'm just like you. It's not what it used to be right now, but it looks like they're getting more and more interest, getting more. I mean, look, we brought Jason DeSalvo out this year. Tyler O'Hara finished 7th. Jeff May was back again. He finished 6th. I mean, there's some names there that are from the past. It was great to see Josh Hayes throw his name in the hat, but it's still the Daytona 200. People are still wanting to go down there and do well. But did you ask Kyle at all? I know you had to have, but I mean, we didn't even talk about it throwing the thing down the road. I mean, the poor N2 guys, they got a brand new bike and they're all happy. The bike's perfectly painted, and Kyle does a big roll and burnout and wads himself and looked like he hurt his knee.
So here's the story with the bike itself.
Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
So the story with the motorcycle itself is one of the owners of N2 Track Days decided that he wanted to get a new R6 as a track day bike. And somebody came up with the harebrained scheme to say, well, why don't you break it in and let Kyle Wyman race it in the Daytona 200? So it wasn't like it was some full-blown Graves, spec bike with, like a purpose-built race bike only. It's a track day bike. And so Kyle wins the Daytona 200, and he goes out there, and I'm sure that this guy who owns the bike is going, wow, this is amazing. I have a nice bike that's got a few miles on it, just wins the Daytona 200, and then Kyle does a burnout, and then crashes it. But it's not the first time Kyle's done it. The first time Kyle did it was the first time he won Daytona on a Harley Davidson years ago, and then he went out and did a burnout and crashed. And it's not only 2 times, he's done it a couple of times. And Jason, you and I have been in racing a long time. It's not the craziest thing in the world to have a rider on a cool down lap wad some bikes up. And so I get Kyle did it, and it's a bummer that the N2 bike, it wasn't a lot of damage, Kyle said, but I'm just curious, since we're talking about it, any memorable ones for you that you can go back and think about riders over the years that have wadded some stuff up on the cool down lap? I got a couple.
Oh my gosh. The best. I mean, how could I don't even know if we've touched on it before. I think we have, but Yates, I mean, how do you you can't, I mean, I could think of 3 right now. 3. I know he did 3 bikes that I remember. And the first one he did was at Brainerd in front of me on the cool down lap. In front of me, he backed it into turn 4, backed it in and got a little close to the edge of the track that was wet. The grass was wet. And he threw the thing and flung the thing down the road at Brainerd. And then the famous rolling burnout at Roadracing when he won there on a 600.
So crazy good.
The guy did stuff on 600s. He was so good. I don't know how he won sometimes. I mean, he was just that good. He was amazing. But he crashed 600 come into pit lane doing a roll and burnout on the front straightaway at Roadracing. That was a good one. But the one I remember where everybody was really pissed off about was when he crashed on the cool-off lap coming out of the chicane at Roadracing, like doing one of his, because the guy had such throttle control and he could get the thing sideways and ride it on the edge of the tire sideways. But he high-sided a Superbike on the cool-off lap and destroyed it out of the chicane. So you got to give the prize to Aaron, right? You got to give it to him. He's the one.
He's at. Let me think about that. I remember Loudon, New Hampshire, John Hopkins, Formula Extreme on an Ulrich, I think they were Valvoline sponsored back then, bike. And he comes across the line for the win, wheel in the air. The wheel had stopped turning and it's on a banking. And he set it down. And then like whap goes the front end and whap. Down goes Hopkins. Down goes Hopkins. And I remember John Ulrich being really pissed about that one.
Well, I would say there that as happy as John was for the win, he was twice as pissed off knowing that his bike's coming back in the crash truck or whatever. If it did,
yeah, because you just win. You just win. No, it did because
everything's good
until a foot peg broke off.
Yeah,
yeah. That was the early days of eBay, and I put that foot peg on eBay and sold it to a guy and took the money and gave it back to the team for water. Like the crash foot peg ended up selling for like $25 or $27. Guy bought it, got a picture of John. I think there was a picture of him crashing it, framed the whole thing, had John sign it. And that guy, bought a foot peg. It was pretty crazy.
You remember last week I kind of told you my story about Keith Flint, and I met him on the back at Brands Hatch. Like we were on the back fence at one of the best after race finished winner failures I've ever seen. James Toseland just won a 600 race in England and does a big wheelie, probably third gear, and loops out. Third gear loop out in the little short chute at Brands behind the pits, and bike was like not good. He got up, he got up, got picked up, got rolled back to pit lane or got back to the podium. But yeah, that was a fast one too. I couldn't believe I saw that one. But
this all right. Last one before we roll into the next topic.
Yeah,
best save on a either a race wheelie or a cool down lap. Best save of all time.
Biaggi. Bruno.
100%.
When he
easy
touches the rear fender to the ground, thing was wobbling all over the place.
Oh man, how he saved that one. If you don't know, just Google it.
Yeah, Google Biaggi wheelie, you'll get it. It's pretty impressive.
Amazing.
So
yeah, well, it was past the tipping point. It was great.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, that was I don't know if it was great, but it was scary great. Yeah, I agree with you. Well, it was Saturday night again, and we had another Supercross. Got a first-time winner of the season, finally. I think Marvin Musquin is probably breathing a big sigh of relief. And this kind of victory that can really give you some steam as the year kind of rolls on. It was at Indianapolis. Musquin wins, Baggett second. We'll talk about our fantasy stuff here in a little while, but because I don't think that was going to be there wasn't a lot of big points scored in that probably this week. But recapping the Monster Energy Supercross for the weekend, Greg, why don't you give us some results? I know the first three were, let's hear the first 5 or 10 if you got them. And did you get to watch it? Did you get to watch the race?
I did not. I was commentating. Okay. But it was in Indianapolis, 100 miles away from where I was.
Yep.
And I had a ticket, and I sent some of the top archery folks to Supercross and got them some tickets to go watch it.
How cool.
They had an absolute ball. It was 100 miles each way, and I was working, unfortunately. But, I mean, props to KTM, dude. Musquin, Blake Baggett, and Cooper Webb, 1, 2, 3. I mean, that 450 SXF factory bike is unreal. We had Tomac in fourth, Justin Barcia coming back. And I thought that was a really pleasant surprise to see him.
Yep.
Joey Savacci, Zach Osborne in seventh, Ken Roxon in eighth, Dean Wilson, Justin Brayton, and Chad Reed. Again, the two veterans right there. Cole Seeley in 12th, killing me, Cole. Tyler Bowers, Justin Hill, Justin Bogle in 15th. And I go back to Bogle in 15th mostly because of our fantasy. And 15th was the wild card this weekend. So,
and it was another race though, Greg, when you talk about Roxon in 8th, there was no passing. Like 3 out of the last 4 weeks of Supercross for me have just not been fun to watch because it's not lent itself to good racing again. Like I think the track at Daytona with Ricky designed was tremendous. And I know he's got a lot of room, but this track it got rough. It got pretty beat up, but they're all 90-degree turns. Everything's 90-degree, and they're all rhythms in the 90 degrees. So it makes it really, really hard to pass. And then the track gets one-lined and rutted. And I think that the first 3 guys stayed kind of the same. Cooper kind of started making a charge at him. Tomac went backwards. Again, he was 3-4 seconds off the win, just finishes 20 seconds back. Not really sure why. It seems to me like the gnarlier the track, usually the better he is. But this track was nasty. Musquin at one point looked like he was going to lose out to Baggett and Cooper as they were catching him, but he was able to hold on. There were some mistakes made late by the other two that kind of opened up gaps and things. Cooper Webb started coming on strong at the end, but again, the track just like there was no passing. It was really strange first turn again, really fast first turn. But just not really a lot going on. I'll be interested to hear what Chad has to say this week.
Yeah, because usually we get probably 2 to 3 minutes of description of how Chad Reed's weekend or day went. This one's a pretty short one.
It was pretty good, to be honest. I was pretty good all weekend. Like, I was top 5 in the first practice, top 5 in the second one. And then I think I was like 9th in the second one, but in the third one. But there was like one section that I struggled in all day, and other than that, I was like top 3 fastest in. Like, there was 3 segments, and 2 of the segments I was top 3 in, and then I was like 15th in one. So I was like 15th in one qualifying, and then like 14th in the other. So I don't know. I mean, I kind of know, but why? But I was I don't know, just struggled on one section of the track really bad. But other than that, it was good. And then in the main event, I was good in that section, so I kind of turned it around. Good.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, that's all he really talked about in that one. And he did tell me, though, that they worked on that thing last week. When we talked about the podcast where they were heading to the test track and they were going to work on, the 3 different types of turns. And he's glad he did, because they actually figured some things out. And in that, he mentioned exactly what you mentioned, Jason, which was those 90-degree corners, and how it was just kind of one of those tracks this week,
Yeah, and it was strange because there were some cool sections of the track, but it was very hard. It seemed like I've never raced Supercross, but watching it was just very hard to make a pass. It would have taken something big every time to try to make a pass. The rhythm sections were a little bit the same, so it wasn't like you could really take a couple different choices. They had 2 different lanes in one corner where everybody kind of started to realize that the inside lane was fastest, so everyone kind of followed their way through there. And really, when you look at the times from practice and qualifying, I know they kind of have they take their best time from both their sessions. It really doesn't ever seem to completely play out in the races. You see Dean Wilson's up there usually in the top 5. Justin Hill is always up there, but then in the races they go back a little bit. Dean Wilson won his heat race, which was, he had the hardest of the 2 heat races, and he rode perfect. He just rode flawless. There was no anybody could go by him, and again, it was just kind of like follow the leader for 20 or 12 minutes, whatever the heat race time is. But it would just be nice if we could see some more some passing.
Yeah, and Chad had mentioned to me, after he had his podium a few weeks ago, he kind of mentioned, that he might want to return to Supercross for another season. And since he really was kind of light on the conversation about what happened at Indy, I decided to say, like, hey, so what's going on with you for next season, and what do you want to do, and all that kind of stuff.
I would like to race one more year. I don't have anything to announce because there's nothing to announce as far as, a team or, staying put where I'm at. I'd love to stay put here at the JGR team. But yeah, like, you're kind of in that situation where you need a team to take you on and have a job and all that kind of stuff. So I'm hoping that in the near, next kind of month or so that can be more clear, and that I can go into the summertime basically feeling good about, we're going racing in the off season and then going racing in January. But right now I don't have that answer. But I know that, like, mentally, physically, I've made the commitment that I would like to go racing next year again, rather than, like, leaning more towards, actually, I'll be honest with you, like pre-Anaheim, I told my wife, I said, like, this is it. This is the last one. And it was probably more of an emotional decision than anything, but I just felt that I was over the fact of providing services to people and companies and selling products all over the world, and feeling like I could still be competitive, but yet people were so stuck on how uncompetitive I was last year and my age and all these kinds of things. And I'm just like, screw it. I'm over it. All I'm doing is working my ass off and getting nothing out of it, really, other than going and racing my dirt bike and selling gear and dirt bikes all over the world. And yet I feel like I'm fighting for a position. So I just, I felt like I was like, screw it, I'm over it. I'm going to, work my butt off this year, do well, and that'll be it. But, I think that when all's said and done, I've had a lot of fun. I've enjoyed the team and enjoyed the sport again. So yeah, I'd like to come back and, do possibly my last one next year.
And Greg, it just goes without saying, I think that in this world that we live in, where everybody's got an opinion and everybody wants to beat people down, I mean, there's very rarely do you read anything on any of the social media platforms that we have where somebody's pumping somebody up. And Chad probably did hear a lot of those things in the sense that he hasn't been as competitive and this and that. As a motorcycle racer, I mean, it really comes down to drive. And if you've still got the drive and you got a good team around you, you should continue. But for sure, at the beginning of the year, I'm sure he probably felt a little beat down. Like maybe he felt like other people think that somebody else should have his spot or whatever the case is. That he's got a young teammate this year who I think's got a lot of talent, and Chad beats him every weekend in Hill. And for one reason or the other, I don't know anything about what Justin's side of the pit looks like or who he's got and that kind of thing. But Chad beats him every weekend. And, with Weston Pike being out injured, I think Chad's done a great job for the whole team. And I think that it maybe, just maybe, that if he continues to get his confidence where he wants it to be, I know he feels like he should be up in the top 5 probably every weekend. And maybe there's something to that he can start to get that. And then if he has a good off season, come back one more year and give it like one last shot,
Yeah, there's something that we talked about that wasn't recorded that he was revealing to me about the way he's starting his motorcycle. And it really has to do with a momentary mental thing that he's going to work on. So he feels that there's some mechanical things that they can work on the starts, but there's also a little bit of Chad where and he's mentioned it in the podcast before, he gets these really amazing starts in practice before the season started. And now he just got this little hiccup right before the gate drops. And he's really convinced, as am I. I mean, I've seen his lap times. There's no real pretending. You can go back and look at the laps and see that he is now consistently a guy who should be finishing either, 4th place or on the podium, like right there. He's not saying I should be winning all the races, but you can kind of discern that from, especially the amount of years he's been in the game. You and I have been in the game. You can see it. So I think the podium reignited his spark to continue to do better. I think he loves the crew that he works with, the JGR team, and he would like to be back. I did ask him about outdoor nationals, and he said, look, I don't really have a desire to do any outdoor nationals, especially the entire series. JGR team is desperately looking for a title sponsor. They're over budget this year, those types of things. And it might be a case where they want Chad to fill in maybe 1, 2, maximum 3 races outdoor this year. But his focus would be to be able to, as he mentioned on the podcast before, earlier in the year, wrap it up this season, maybe sign a deal for next year with JGR to go Supercross racing, and he goes and finds a rally car ride, because that season starts, I think, June and goes until October, I think is what he was saying. Mm-hmm. So he wants to drive a car and kind of set that up. So I think he's in a good space. I think the sport would love to keep Chad Reed around. He's obviously a big pull. He's still got a lot of followers on social media. So with his desire, like you're saying, I mean, Jason, how many times have you seen a rider retire and you just know? You know when that little voice in your head says, okay, I've had enough. And it could be beginning of the season and they run it out. It could be I've had enough, like Eric Bostrom, and just walk away from the sport a race or 2 into the season and do the right thing. Or, it could be that end of the year thing. And that's where I was really shocked, where Chad was like, okay, I told the wife I'm done, but then I've come back now. And I'm like, wow. And he's still getting decent results, podium, flirting in the top 5s, the top 10s. I think it's impressive.
Well, I think that especially if you could still get on a competitive bike, and that would really be the thing that for Chad is going to drive him. And it seems like this year he's put a lot of effort in, as I know he has all the other years, but I don't know if, I think if he could stay on the same bike with the same group of guys around him, that will pay dividends. I don't think jumping onto another brand and trying to rebuild your team and do all that stuff is something that that he would probably, I think that takes a lot of effort. I think it takes a lot of effort. So that said, I think if he could stay on the same team and know that he doesn't really have to move around, if he knew that before the end of this season, and he could go into what would be considered his off season from the end of May, I guess it would be, Greg, to January. It's going to make everything else that he does throughout the summer months more fun for him, because he can literally get ready to start doing the Supercross series in Australia like he did this year. Probably he probably will have more of an outline of exactly what he wants to do. So, and you're right. There's, I mean, me included, there's been a number of guys that, we kind of get out of it. And then, and you kind of feel like, maybe I shouldn't have just left it just yet. Maybe I should have done a couple other things. With me, I'd been with Suzuki for so long that I felt at the end of 06, and our series at that point was going down a little bit. I had kind of felt that I wasn't really going to get any opportunities with anybody else, because at that point I'd built such a strong relationship with Suzuki. I'd been with them for, at that point it must have been almost 12 years. At that point, it actually was 97, so it would have been 10 that I'd been with them, and I just was ready to I wasn't having fun at the races, and it sounds like he's still having fun, and he's still learning, and he still wants to get better, and he's got a good group around him. So I say, Chad, you keep going, man. If you feel comfortable and you want to do it. So let's get into Greg, last
bit.
Yeah. Sorry, buddy. Yep. Go on. Sorry.
Are we going to the last bit of the show? Like, we're just going to skip over fantasy? Is that what we're doing?
No, we're not skipping. That's what I was getting ready to start. So you tried to throw the curveball at me there. Not cool, G-Dub. Not cool at all. But Greg, you had a good week last week. I don't know what you're complaining about. You had a pretty good week. Oh, wait, no, you didn't have a good week.
No, I did not. I think I've got, 15 whopping points?
See, you don't even know where I was going with this. You beat G-Dub had a great week.
Yeah,
I see G-Dub on here, and I know you had a shit week, Greg. You always do. So, but Travis is so far ahead of you now that did you already send him a check? You know what? Don't send him a check. Send him something. PayPal him or something.
No, I have not yet. No, it's not sending.
You're 100 points behind him.
I can make that up.
He was behind you when you guys made the bet.
Like a gambler on a bad streak. I can make
All right,
that
enough
up.
said. Enough said. You know who had a good week? You know who had a really good week? He must know something we don't. MotoAmerica Chuck had a good week.
Did he crush it?
52 points on a week where you had Muscan. He actually had Marvin winning. He had him winning. So he hadn't won a race all year, and Chuck picked him to win. He had Tomac second, Cooper Webb third, Savacci fourth, which I believe, and Roxon fifth. So Roxon didn't score, but he got 52 points. He was the big jumper. Everybody up in the front all kind of had crap weeks, except for someone I haven't talked about yet. I'm not sure who Peanut Day 521 is, so we'll have to figure out who that is. But big week, 46 pointer there, and all the rest of us for just 15 pointers. A lot of people. It was a hard week though.
It was. We're on rmfantasysx.com. It's the Greg's Garage Pod group. If you want to join us, it's not too late. Did you take a look to see what our last place finisher? So half season Joker. So it looks like we've had some people join as well late.
Yep,
half season Joker, 36 points. So in 2 rounds, already was 77 points. And then we've had.
He's going to beat you too.
Spongy Love Cakes. Good to have you. Spongy Love Cakes. Thank you so much for joining us with 20. Keys 38. Derek
Keys. How cool is that? Derek joined up.
Yeah. And
I saw him out at Buttonwillow, AFM at Buttonwillow. I saw him out there.
Yeah, so he's in it. And Joe Doe, who hasn't picked anything yet, is our 51st person. So jump in anytime. We might talk about you here as Hughes, Lugnuts, Alex Fuller, and JP43, your top 4 in fantasy. And Pridmore, you can suck it. All right.
Dude, you're 39th out of 50 that have scored. You're in the industry. You have direct line to Chad Reed. You talk to him you just suck, dude. I'm embarrassed for you. Can we move on?
That sound means it's time for our quick shift segment presented by ARAI. Jason, 3 generations, ARAI has been making some of the world's finest helmets. And of course, ARAI helmets meets all safety standards. but they also pride themselves in having a blend of engineering tech and human craftsmanship that makes an ARAI helmet fit better and feel better, which also protects you better. Your head's worth the best. Go visit ARAIAmericas.com for more information on tech, fit, and paint jobs. ARAIAmericas.com. You owe it to you. So what we're going to do here is just a couple of quick questions. We're going to give about 60 seconds or so, and then when you hear this, that means theoretically it's time for Jason to wrap it up, but we know how it goes. All right, Jay, first one is Valentino Rossi recently quoted as saying that he thinks Suzuki has made the biggest improvements over the winter. What do you think?
Well, I think they were definitely onto something towards middle part of 2018. What'd they get last year, Greg? 8 podiums, I think, between Iannone and Rins last year. So, but this year the Suzuki's come out of the, out of the box really good. All preseason testing, they've been fast. They've proven to put a rookie on the bike at the first round or the first few tests in Mir, and he's gone extremely quick too. So I would definitely have to say that of all the bikes, that the Suzuki has definitely brought itself more to the forefront. We're not just talking about Honda and Ducati and Yamaha anymore. The Suzuki's got to be thrown in there. And I think that they've got an extremely talented rider in Alex Rins, who I think is going to win this year. So I saw the same thing that Rossi said. And he would know better than any of us. He gets to see it all on the track too. So I definitely feel the Suzuki's on point.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think Dovizioso also made the comment saying that the Suzuki, nothing turns better mid-corner than the Suzuki, which to me was a little bit of prodding on the Ducati side of things, saying, hey, Ducati, let's get to work at this.
Yeah, for sure. Last week, Greg, there was a massive fire at Jerez after day one of testing with the MotoE bikes for a schedule what was going to be a 3-day test. Luckily, nobody was hurt in the fire, which is, if you saw the pictures of what was going on there with that whole temporary garage they put up, it was just devastating. And it started just after midnight. I know that there's an investigation under the way. They're coming up with some causes. None of the bikes apparently were plugged in at the time. We know that the opening round is canceled, and they're thinking about still trying to get a 5-race schedule in. What do you think? I mean, do you think that they're trying to rush these things now, or do you think, I just feel bad for all the teams and the people, and obviously they feel like they can get it back together?
Well, one of my favorite topics in college was actually air crash investigation, and I just think that if you look at that from that overview look, I think maybe you pull the plug on it this year and you just go, let's really make sure we've got this taken care of. Because if you have a paddock full of transporters and that paddock goes up in flame again because they don't diagnose the actual problem, sometimes it takes time to diagnose a symptom of a problem as opposed to getting to the root problem. Did I say that right? You don't want to solve the symptom of a problem. You want to solve the problem. So
correct.
I think you wait a while and not rush it. It feels to me like everyone's like, nope, now's the time. We've got to do it. We've got to rush it and let's get it done. So I would probably err on the side of caution. What do you think?
I just think it depends on the races that they try to choose at the end of the year as well. I think, will they allow themselves to do something other than at a MotoGP event? Will they intertwine with a World Superbike event somewhere, something like that? Because I know that the way they chose the schedule, they were kind of doing it at tracks that were a little closer maybe, and just looking at what the schedule was supposed to be. But hopefully they find out exactly what the cause of that problem is, and we just don't ever have to see that again. That's to lose a whole paddock like that it's devastating, especially when you think of the work that everybody put in.
Yeah, it was pretty scary. All right, here's our race calendar, because Jason and I would love for you to get out and watch some races. Supercross jumps across the U.S. to Seattle, Washington. American Flat Tack visits Woodstock, Georgia. AMA National Enduro in Ormond Beach, Florida. FIM Motocross is in Matterley Basin in Great Britain. World Enduro is in Dahlem, Germany. And, of course, there's local races all over the place, so check them out. Next week, of course, we're going to take a closer look at MotoAmerica, because it's right around the corner, the kickoff of that season. We're going to talk about Flat Track, Supercross, and whatever else pops up. Our thanks to Kyle Wyman and Chad Reed for their time. And once again, Daytona International Speedway and FansChoice.tv for allowing us to use that race clip. I just think it's time for you to say goodbye, Jason.
Thanks, G-Dub, again for another good week. And looking forward to another weekend of a little bit of racing. And let's get it going.